What's going on, Bitcoin accumulation country? My name is Phil. This is the Fun with Crypto podcast. We are in season 2, and this is episode 29. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I've got another great interview, very special guest. I am going to be talking with Nick Neuman from the Casa team. And I got to sit down with him for a really incredible conversation. I have to admit, when I was listening to him explain his rabbit hole story, I was totally taken aback, and because I just didn't expect him to come from the background that he did. And again, it's my own bias. It has nothing to do with him. It was my own bias where I kind of figured that he came from a more like a technical background because of the way that I met him. Anyways, you guys will see in the interview. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, here is my interview with Nick Neuman. All right, everybody in crypto land, thank you very much for joining us again. And with us tonight, we have a very special guest from the Casa team. It was actually the first node that I purchased was the Casa node, and I haven't looked back since then. And one of the first people that I actually met from that team and that helped me out was the gentleman that's joining us tonight, Nick Neuman. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you having you on my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
So I want to get right into it. Let's get started with before you got into Bitcoin, like what's your background? Like how did this all happen? Because you definitely work for one of the coolest companies, and you're building some of the coolest toys out there for us.
Well, thank you. So originally, I started out in banking after I graduated from school, and moved on from that because I just decided that I wanted to do more building on the product side. And so I was then, after that, moved into some product management at a travel tech startup. And from there was really when I started to learn about Bitcoin while I was working there, and moved into Casa after a couple of years, and kind of a longer rabbit hole story that I can go into. But that's really the quick version of my background before joining Casa.
That's really incredible. Okay, so and I guess that's my own bias, but I just because you helped me technically, I didn't expect you to come from a banking background. So
yeah, and it's funny because I look back on that banking background and think about how it's basically the exact opposite of what I'm doing today with Bitcoin, which has significant potential to disintermediate quite a bit of what I was doing before.
So I guess I'm gonna pry a bit on that, but let me ask you this, because I personally don't have a banking background. The listeners know I come from a network administration type of background, and now I specialize in something else called access control. But essentially, did you end up coming to the conclusion at that point? I mean, I'm assuming that you fully understood, fractional reserve banking, and did it really, what I mean? Was this like a call to arms kind of thing where you came to Bitcoin from there, or?
I think it wasn't a direct transition because of that. I think what the transition was that I was working at an investment bank, and what I didn't like about it was that I felt like we were really just moving money around. We weren't really doing something with it. We weren't really building something. We were just, moving money to make money. And so I made the jump into being a product manager in tech after that, purely because I wanted to feel like I was actually building a business and building products. And so now being in Bitcoin, kind of a couple of hops later, is something that, looking back, it's kind of funny just thinking about how Bitcoin is so much the opposite of what the current banking system stands for.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously I think it's amazing that, somebody who comes from the banking and especially investing has essentially come to the dark side, you know.
Yep. Well, I don't know
But
that I look at it as the dark side anymore. Maybe
no,
we're
me
on the
neither.
light side.
I agree. We were the dark side, but you know what? We were never the dark side. It's always been the better side.
Exactly.
It's just the perception. So okay, so how did you like how did you find Bitcoin?
Yeah. So while I was working as a product manager, I started to hear about Ethereum actually first. And this was about January 2017. Somebody told me about Ethereum, and I started looking into it and reading about it. And I was initially interested in that due to some of the possibilities that various teams were working on, like decentralized identity or DAOs. And so I really started reading everything I could at that point about Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I started to learn about Bitcoin at the same time. Um, and so one thing that really interested me about the crypto space in general is that at the time, especially, it's gotten a little bit better now, but it's very arcane and it's not necessarily easily understandable for the average person. And so I was, that's one of the things that I like to do is take something that's more technical and difficult and break it down into something that is simplified and usable by the everyday person. And so I actually started out doing a small series of posts on Medium that took white papers, various Ethereum token white papers, and broke them down and put them in, normal speak, basically, so anybody could understand them. And at this time, I started to think about some potential product ideas in the space because I just saw a huge opportunity with Bitcoin and Ethereum in general. And one of the things that I realized was a huge problem was the fact that was seed phrases. You could lose your seed phrase and lose all your Bitcoin if you
True.
don't have access to your wallet anymore. And that's a huge problem for mainstream adoption. I mean, people can barely keep track of the password to their Facebook account. How do you expect them to keep 24 words on a piece of paper hidden somewhere in their house or something? So that was something that I really started to focus on. And I actually signed up and participated in the ETH Denver 2018 hackathon. And along with my team, we built a product called KeySplit, which it was actually not specific to Ethereum, but it took a private key and used Shamir's secret sharing to split that seed phrase into 5 fragments. And then you would hand those 5 pieces out to friends or family to keep safe. And if you ever lost your seed phrase or lost access to your wallet, you could combine any 3 of those 5 pieces of the key and you'd get your seed phrase back. And so we ended up winning the hackathon with that. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that was a huge surprise for me coming out of left field because I really didn't know anybody in the space. I didn't know my team beforehand. We all met on Slack and didn't meet in person until Denver at the hackathon. And so afterward, I was working on putting together a team and trying to make it into a real business because I thought it was not just something I should leave kind of at the cutting room floor at the hackathon. And so at that point, somehow Jeremy, the CEO of Casa, heard that we had won and he reached out to me and we talked and realized we had quite a bit of alignment on our vision for some of the improvements that could be made in the space. And so I ended up joining Casa instead of going and building my own company on that. And that was a great decision because the Casa team is awesome. And I'm super happy with it and with what we've been able to build. And so then since joining Casa, I've been on a team with people like Jameson and Jeremy and Elena, who was previously the CEO of Trezor. And they're, a bunch of very strong Bitcoiners. And I just started, and I had to learn how Bitcoin worked because we were a Bitcoin first company and I'd previously been in Ethereum. And so I
It's
talked to
okay.
them. I know everybody goes through the phase, right?
It's okay. I everybody knows I have a shitcoin past,
Yeah, exactly.
and I'm reborn. So continue. This is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, so I started to learn about a lot more about Bitcoin from them and started reading a lot more about it specifically and really realized the genius in its simplicity versus basically everything else out there from the cryptocurrency side. And since then, since that light bulb really went off a couple of months after joining Casa, I've just been fully focused on Bitcoin and how we can improve the user experience of using and interacting and saving Bitcoin for everyday people.
That is absolutely awesome, and I can tell you, being technical but not technical enough to write my own code or anything like that. Having something like a Casa node, the utility node, I call it, because that's really like for me that's what it is, right? You like a router, you buy it, you've got like your your 5-6 steps, and you're up and running.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's absolutely fantastic. So okay, so let me ask you this: what if you don't? What do you do at Casa? Because I'm assuming because you come from the product management background, so I'm assuming that's like what are you doing over there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the head of product at Casa, and so um, what that means is that I generally try to stay out of the way of all the engineers and designers as they build awesome stuff. and and occasionally I give maybe a little tip here and there about it would maybe be a little more usable if it was done this way. And so the team at Casa is amazing. We have a great team of engineers and designers and the rest of our team as well. And so I'm super lucky to work there. And really what I do, all joking aside, is I guide the vision and implementation for all of our products. And so, when we're thinking about how do we make improvements to the node in a specific feature that people are requesting, I'm really initially working with the designers to come up with the best way to do something that we've never really seen before, because Lightning is completely new and nobody knows how to best display managing channels, that kind of thing. And then I'm going and talking with the engineers and making sure that we can implement what we've designed and then going through the implementation, testing it, talking to customers, getting feedback, all of that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of touch points across the product lifecycle, which is why I really enjoy product management, just because I get to see kind of start to finish how a product starts and what it becomes.
So that's really interesting that you describe it that way, because I'm a tier 3 level technician, and I work closely with product management and engineering, and I can definitely say that your style of coming and talking directly with, I wouldn't expect a product manager to be sitting on the Telegram chat, talking about, issues or, UI improvements with, with people, with the people like me. So I can definitely say that that's probably a really good part of your guys' success, is that you're willing to do the boots on the ground.
Yeah. And I think that's something that companies can easily fall into a trap of not frequently talking with their customers because they think, we're too busy. We know what we need to build, et cetera. And I think that a good product manager is very in touch with his or her customers, because they're the people that you're building the product for. And maybe you start out with kind of a gut feeling and you're building it for yourself. But I've had so many times when after the product is released and it's out there in the wild, I've had so many times when customers come to me with an idea that I would have never thought of. And so the customer feedback is just crucial to building a successful business, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally agree. And actually, along those lines, I have to ask, do you guys, because I recall Jeremy kind of hinting to this, and of course you know, say what you can, because I know you can't say everything,
Mhm.
but are you guys going to be building like an enterprise type of node? Because I honestly think that people don't understand the full, you know, the full implications of Lightning right now. Like right now, it's a bunch of us, you know, enthusiasts
Right.
that are putting our Bitcoin out there, and I think that people don't really appreciate the actual payment network that is actually growing out there. And I truly believe that at some point, we may end up seeing, not too far off, that, you know, almost every single domicile, you know, ends up having one of these things running.
hmm
So
Yeah, so I think that right now we're focused on the end consumer because, from our perspective, putting nodes in as many people's hands as possible is just critical for the success of the network. Obviously, it helps secure the network, but it also helps people um, run their own, Bitcoin stack, the full stack of Bitcoin as it was meant to be run. And so there's still a ton of work to do to get as many people as possible doing that. And so that's why that we're just super focused on that and helping people with that right now. But we do actually there are some businesses that are running Casa nodes, and they're not doing a ton of transactions necessarily over Lightning, but I think, like for example, we had somebody write in. It was somebody in Europe who was using the Casa node to take Lightning and Bitcoin payments at their dentist office. So they were running a dentistry, and they were taking payments in Lightning using the Casa node, which is just, I thought it was great. Like totally out of left field, but super awesome to see some small businesses starting to use it. And so I definitely think that that's an avenue that we could grow into in the future. But for now, we're focused on retail and consumers.
that's actually really incredible. It'd be I mean, it'd be really cool to to see that on your site. You know, all the people using it in these different applications or something. You know, kind of
Yeah.
spreading the word. Let me
Yeah, exactly.
let me ask you this, because I obviously, I mean, don't get me wrong, I just updated my note a couple of days ago, so you know, Murphy's Law has it that you probably have already put in what I'm asking. But if you haven't, let me ask you this: have you gotten any requests for like a reporting UI? Because I know we can see the channels and we can see the channel balances, but like I think like people want to know, like maybe the daily or weekly change. Like somebody goes and puts, let's say, 2 BTC. Like they'd want to be able to chart, to see like, what's the change, on the week, on the day, kind of thing. Has anybody brought that type of feedback yet?
So we haven't really had a request, too many requests for seeing like Bitcoin price reporting over time. But
Oh no.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I might have misunderstood there.
Oh no, sorry. No, I think it's more maybe the way I explained it. I mean, like, because you know how you'll go and you'll put, let's say you have 1 Bitcoin on the node, and then half of that Bitcoin goes into the channels, right?
Right.
So you've got, let's say, 0.5 of a Bitcoin, and now you've got all that in channels, and let's say you have it in autopilot or whatever, but like your Bitcoin amount, that 0.5% is technically changing if your node is getting used, because
Right.
you're making incrementally a small amount of satoshis, whatever that number may be. And I think people want to be able to see that. Like I tried to do that myself with an Excel spreadsheet by recording my numbers every single day, and although I was able to do it, it was extremely painful. So
Yeah, it totally is. And so seeing the return from your channels is definitely something that we have had requested many times.
cool.
And it's something that we've been working on designing and figuring out the best way to report some of this stuff, because if you think about it, some nodes are really well set up for routing, and they are routing many more transactions than other nodes. And there's a lot of people who are running nodes that maybe aren't necessarily super optimized. And so when they look at a reporting dashboard, they're going to see that they have made very little Bitcoin. And so what we're trying to do is think about how do we then give them a way to improve that situation next. So we don't want to leave them with this thought of, well, I haven't made any money, so this sucks. We want to give them like, here's how you can balance your channels to make your node more attractive to other nodes for routing, that kind of stuff. And so I've actually been talking a lot with Alex Bosworth over at Lightning Labs about some of the improvements that they're making on their end to the LND protocol, which affects how Autopilot will connect to other nodes. So for example, Autopilot's going to start scoring other nodes in the network based on their success in routing. And so you can actually make your node more attractive to other nodes running Autopilot by doing certain things in the setup and optimization of your node. And so kind of wrapped into that, how many fees am I making? There's a really important component of how do I optimize my node? What's the next step to take? And so that's the really difficult part, I think, to build here and to design. So that's what we've been working on.
I really like that. That is absolutely incredible. That's, you know what, to your point, it's not enough to just have the charting and the numbers, but it's how do I optimize this? So I think that's really incredible.
Yeah, and another thing that's just interesting there is it's not all about making fees. Many people are interested in how do I don't even care how many fees I'm making. How do I most benefit the network and most help other people route successfully? And so there's also that element of it as well that feeds into it. So
I totally agree. I mean, to your point, originally I got into it, it didn't have anything to do with the fees. Like I knew that I could make a small amount of Satoshis anytime I routed something, but really it's about, to your point, it's about helping the network. So
right.
Yeah, that's really incredible. So, okay, you mentioned that you're in talks with Alex and over at Lightning Labs. So I got to ask you, of course, watchtowers. Are you guys starting to look at at possibly having a watchtower implementation for Casa? Is that something? I mean, I know it's still not like set in stone, but I feel like it's really come a long way and it's going to be out there soon.
Yeah, so I think watchtowers are really interesting, and it's something that we've been keeping an eye on all of the developments that they have coming out, and we don't have anything in the works for the immediate future on that, but it's something that once they actually put it out in a major release, then we'll get right on looking into that and seeing how we can build that into the node, because I think that watchtowers and the ability for people to use their node as a watchtower for friends or family or even just other people on the network is super interesting. And so it's, something that's going to be important to the success of the network. And it's just a matter of making sure that we work on it after it is released as a final stable version. Because we have a lot of customers that are non-technical that we have to make sure that any updates we make, aren't using something that's so experimental that they could lose funds, kind of thing, or that, it could totally break something. So we try to wait until it gets to a major release that's fully public and not just a beta release candidate before we really start building that stuff in.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely incredible. I mean, really, it's definitely amazing the way that you guys are really geared to the user experience. So let me ask you this: have you gotten any demand for like a kind of a beefier type of node? Like using an SSD drive, instead, and or maybe something, because I know that the Raspberry Pi 4 just came out, so there's there's like the 1 gig, 2 and 4 gig.
Yep.
So
I think that's something that we've definitely had a lot of requests for a beefier node, and we've kind of vaguely talked about this, but we are working on a second version that will have more powerful hardware. And, especially when you get into some of the higher channel counts, you just really need a lot more of the processing power and the memory from the hardware side that the current Raspberry Pi doesn't necessarily give. And so that's something that we will have more to share on, coming up, but we aren't talking too much about it yet, just that we are working on it.
It's super interesting. Let me ask you, I mean, what do you think that eventually we could end up seeing like a, kind of a Casa OS on like a server box,
Yeah. I mean,
because think about it,
I think that's something we've talked about, because some people have actually written in and said, hey, I want to run my own Lightning node on my PC, or, this stronger, like even an AWS server or something. Some people want to do that. But they've said, is there any way that I could just purchase the software purely of the Casa node and utilize your guys' UI because we really like your design, et cetera? And that isn't possible right now, just because our software is so deeply intertwined with the hardware side of it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that I think we will evaluate in the future on how can we just get this to as many people as possible. And so while we think it's really important that everybody be running their node on a dedicated, secure device, some people don't want to do that. And we want to make sure that we can service those people and still give them that good user experience of using Bitcoin.
Cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, it's definitely, I was already thinking of that as soon as I used it, because to your point, actually, I wanted to ask you, do you guys have a user experience group, like somebody that actually because I know that in most cases it's engineers that end up kind of designing the flow, and then, they'll get comments and feedback from other people around them of how something should kind of look. But to the most point, I find a lot of times you end up with products that are, built by engineers for engineers. Like, do you guys obviously I don't want you to give any secrets away, but do you have a group that kind of evaluates that type of stuff, like the user flow? Because it really is intuitive and it's not difficult to figure out. So
yeah, I mean, I think that we really try to, when we build our products, we try to come from a design first perspective. And so we have a couple of really awesome designers, Scott and Derek, who have backgrounds working at Tinder and MeUndies, and they are excellent at what they do. And so I'll spend a lot of time working with them to think about what the best and simplest user flow is for somebody to use a product. And so we don't necessarily have a dedicated user experience team, but we spend a lot of time on the design side thinking about how to take these complex concepts and make them usable. And it's kind of funny because a lot of that requires cutting out features, because if you're a developer building for developers, you want to give as many features and settings that you can tweak as possible. And when you're building for the everyday person, they don't want to go in and have to have all these settings that they're going to have to toggle and tweak and stuff before it's even running. And so what we started with was, how do we simplify this down to just the most simple and understandable process and product possible? And then from there, we talk to our customers and see what are the most important settings and things that you want to tweak that we need to give back to you. And so, for example, lately, for obvious reasons, fee selection has been, for on-chain transactions and opening channels, has been a huge request. And so we just added that into our last release. And it was something that for a while we were just auto selecting fees for people because it didn't matter. But now that fees are really going up, it's important that people have that control. And so we sat down and I talked with the engineers about, hey, what are our options here in terms of the control we have for the on-chain transactions through LND. And then I go and talk to the designers about what do you think is the best way to display these features. Here's our capabilities. And so then I just kind of get out of the way and let them do their work. But it's really just, I mean, it's a team effort, I would say, but there's not one specific team that is focused on user experience.
That is, well, you know what? That's your team. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and when we go to hire engineers, we actually put a lot of focus in the interviewing process on their ability to think like a user. And so a lot of our engineers have a very, very good design sense and a good UX sensibility. And so there's many times whether it's on the mobile side or the node side, one of our engineers will be building something and they'll be like, Nick, I'm looking at this and trying it out and it really does not make sense. And, it was completely came from them. It's their idea. And I think that's what sets a lot of our engineering team apart from many engineers at other companies. And so that's why I feel lucky to be working with the people that I do, because they have that extra sense of what the user needs.
It really is remarkable. And okay, so I've got one useless feature that I wonder if people have asked you for this. Has anybody asked for a dark theme?
That is so
totally useless.
No, dark theme's amazing, let me tell you. And
but it looks so cool.
Yeah, so that's funny because our Scott and Derek, our designers, will love hearing this because they've been pushing for a dark theme for the past few months, and I've been saying, let's hold off for now. Let's wait a little bit, and so I'll have to make sure that make sure to tell them that we got a request for a dark mode. But yeah, I am a big fan of dark mode personally as well.
All my stuff.
Yeah, I immediately switched Twitter over to dark mode when they released that, and it looks great. And we've actually put in some dark mode stuff in our Keymaster app that shows on some of the main key set screens, it's in dark mode and it looks amazing. And so I definitely am on the same page with you there. We're just we have to balance our priorities. So it'll come though, I'm sure.
It's a cosmetic enhancement that goes all the way to the bottom of the list.
The cosmetic enhancement that I like to joke about that we just recently added was the ability to change your node color in Explorers. And that was something that we heard from people for a while. And I was always saying, oh, why do we need this? It does nothing. And we always joked around it, but enough customers were repeatedly requesting that they wanted to be able to change their node color in Explorers. And so we just added it at like two releases ago, and it's fun, but it's one of those just fun things that you get to eventually. And so.
Exactly. And I totally don't blame you for joking about that one, but yes, I do remember not being able to change it from that blue. And I'm like, why? I'm like, why is everyone else getting all these colors and I'm not? So, that's awesome. Okay, so let me ask you this, Nick. I obviously I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I really appreciate it. Let me tell you, it's been so amazing. Do you have any final thoughts for the listeners? Actually, you know what? Before we go to final thoughts, there was I was listening to a podcast. I just thought of this now. I was listening to Stefan Livera interviewing Is it Arena?
Elena.
Elena, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And
Oh yeah, no worries.
she was saying that that you wrote this really interesting article on your guys blog page about, I don't know if it was personal security or being hacked. It was on the the blog.keys.casa page.
Yeah, so let's see.
I'm trying
We
to
have
I was trying to find it.
we have a few articles about that. Like, for example, there's one. We have one that's about how to be better with your Bitcoin OPSEC. We have another one that is what to do if you're the victim of a data breach. So we have a few things like that, and we try to put these articles on the blog that help the everyday person understand not only what Bitcoin is, but also just how to keep themselves secure from a more general sense. And so that's something that I think we posted this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's a short article, but it's helpful and hits the high points of why would you want to check if you're the victim of a data breach, and how would you do that? And then if you find out that you are, what do you want to do next? What are the next steps? And so, that's something that we think is really important, just to help people not only understand Bitcoin and run a node, et cetera, but to maintain their overall cybersecurity.
Well, I'm going to post a link to the obviously to the Casa page, and I'm going to post a do you also have do you have a Medium page?
So we actually transitioned away from Medium. I think we have a page still up there, but it's not really up to date. We transitioned away from Medium just because we were starting to see a lot of the things that Medium was doing around some of the censorship that we really weren't big fans of. And so we moved over to our own blog just to self-host it and to get off of that platform so that we could control our own destiny.
Okay, so I'll post a link to obviously the Casa page, but I'll also post a link to your blog page. So, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners? Anything you want to leave with the Fun with Crypto podcast folks?
Yeah, so I think that something that is just a final thought is that one of the things we like to talk about at Casa is what we call the fourth wave of computing. And so if you look back at some of the various previous waves of computing, it started out in mainframes, or these big machines in people's in offices, and nobody really owned their own computer at that point. And then it shrunk significantly, and everybody started owning their own PCs, but everything was local. All the file storage was local, et cetera. There wasn't a ton of internet access. And then in the third wave, internet came around and things started moving into the cloud, and suddenly nothing was held locally on your computer and everything's in the cloud. And turns out that's not great for privacy. And so now we think that this fourth wave is coming, driven by Bitcoin, and we really see it a lot of the secure, very privacy sensitive information that is currently held in the cloud coming back down to be held locally on a device like a node. And so not only are you interacting with the Bitcoin network from this device, which is already a huge step forward, but maybe you start storing some of your more personal data only on this device rather than keeping it in the cloud where it can be reached by others. And so we think that really has been enabled by Bitcoin and by this new wave of networking from node to node. And that's something that I've just been thinking about lately. And it's something that we talk about frequently at Casa, but it's happening more and more as the Lightning Network grows and as Bitcoin becomes more popular and people understand it more, I think that the industry in general, the computing industry, will really make a shift towards that. And just an example that's pretty interesting is, Microsoft had their announcement about decentralized identity and how they think that these identities will be managed by people in their own homes, on secure, separate computing devices. And that's why they reached out to us about partnering with them on that. And so that's something that we want to bring to node owners in the future after Microsoft does a little more development on their end to enable that. And so that's some things that are happening under the surface that I think are really going to be interesting for the industry over the next year or so.
That is incredibly cool. I did not realize that. That is amazing. And to your point, I think that privacy is becoming more personal, and that whole self-sovereignty is really, it's it kind of sounds corny, but it's almost becoming cool,
Yeah. And as more people get used to the idea of it being important, it's just going to happen faster and faster, because privacy a year ago, most people didn't really care about it. They've got all their information on Facebook and Google, et cetera. And now all the breaches and articles that have been coming out for the last 2 years are finally starting to get into people's heads, and they're finally starting to flip over to realizing why protecting their personal privacy is important. And so I think that'll only accelerate over the next year. And that's really, in everything we build, we're really trying to hit on that ability to protect your own personal privacy and to manage your own sovereignty. So
it's really, really incredible. Thank you again for sharing and taking the time to come on my show. So if people want to reach you, what would you say would be the best way to contact you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's been fun. And the best way to contact me is probably on Twitter at @Neuman. And then you can also go to the Casa Twitter. It's at Casa Hodl. And then you can always check us out on Telegram and our Telegram channel, or message us personally on Telegram.
Very cool. Thank you so much again for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Nick Neuman from the Casa Hodl team. His contact details are going to be in the show notes. If you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter or Telegram. I'm at CoinIcarus. Or if you want to reach me by email, just drop me a line. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Any feedback is welcome. You can find me. I'm funwithcrypto at protonmail.com. Catch you all next time.